Tituba.
Sometimes called the Black Witch of Salem, Tituba's true origins are unknown. Some claim she came from Barbados, others from Africa.
Tituba was practicing folk magic, things like divination and fortune-telling and folk healing and remedies and all these things that certainly would have looked like witchcraft to a Puritan.
And what do I find here?
Some have even suggested that Tituba practiced a form of voodoo.
Since 1510, when the slave trade began, they took the religion of voodoo wherever they exported slaves. And no matter how much Christians tried to shove Christianity down their throats, they always had their voodoo fetishes and idols to pray to.
But perhaps most intriguing is that the divining method of reading egg whites in water that allegedly sparked the hysteria is reportedly neither African nor Caribbean.
What do you see?
Was she a witch or was she just doing games with the kids?
Some historians have looked for scientific reasons to explain the girl's affliction.
Another theory was the ergot poisoning theory, which is the naturally reoccurring fungus on rye, which was a grain that they grew. It looks like it's a withered grain, so it wouldn't look like there was something wrong. It just looks like there's a dried up seed in it. Ergot would have produced convulsions in people eating infected bread.
From trances to violent thrashing, many of the symptoms displayed by the Salem girls shared eerie similarities to other documented cases of ergot poisoning.
There was an episode of ergot poisoning in France after World War II when the rye crop was infected, and people did have convulsions.
But some of the symptoms don't match up.
Ergot poisoning produces convulsions in people with a vitamin A deficiency. Given the food available in Salem in 1692, they probably did not have a vitamin A deficiency. If a person does not have a vitamin A deficiency, the symptom is gangrene, not convulsions, and nobody reported gangrene.
The most generally accepted theory is that the girls became consumed by the attention showered on them.
Everybody, from the sheriff on down, was hanging on their every word. They had more power than they would ever again have in their lives.
Bridget Bishop, we have a warrant for your arrest.
It literally became a juggernaut. In fact, it started extending way beyond Salem.
Release me!
At that point, there were so many people who were believing the girls as legitimate arbiters of good and evil that adults were willing to go along with almost anything they said.
Is it possible that a few young women knowingly sent nearly 24 people to their death? Only one accuser would ever formally apologize for her actions.
Once Paris was basically thrown out of the congregation after the witchcraft was over, a new minister, Reverend Joseph Green, came, and he tried to bring back some peace to the village. And one of the things he did was, when Ann Putnam, the 12-year-old chief accuser in 1692, wanted to become a full-fledged church member in the early 1700s, Green asked if she would do this confession, in which she says she's sorry that in her youth she was used as an instrument by the devil to accuse people that she now believed were innocent. And the neat thing about it is right here is the signature. We don't think Anne could read or write, but she could write her name. And there's her name acknowledging this.
Was it adolescent mind games, witchcraft, political manipulation, or did some other combination of elements escalate into one of the most diabolical moments of American history? Coming up, a community struggle to forget its deadly past.
When I was a kid in Danvers, in polite society, you didn't talk about the witchcraft.
300 years ago, witches were persecuted and hanged in Salem. Today, witches flock here, making up more than 5% of the local population.
Salem is about 48,000 people, and there are 3,000 witches. So we're doing very well.
From the Witch Museum, to the Witch Dungeon, to the Witch House, nearly every corner of Salem reminds you that you are in Witch City.
Along the East Coast, every seaport has a maritime history. But none of these other seaports have witches and magic. Only Salem.
I think that we can easily call Salem the witch capital of our country and probably North America because of the whole history and the fact that there are many practicing witches there today.
What was once a horrifying epic in history has now become a lively visitor attraction in the form of plays, museums, and occult shops. But 5 miles west of Salem in the town of Danvers, residents have taken a much more somber approach to remembering the hysteria.
When I was a kid in Danvers, in polite society, you didn't talk about the witchcraft.
Once known as Salem Village, Danvers was the original epicenter of the entire hysteria.
Danvers was extremely guilt-ridden by what had happened. A lot of people in Salem Village were affected, and when the witchcraft was over, they wanted to forget about it. When Danvers became an independent township in 1752, it was very happy to get rid of this word Salem Village and become Danvers, a word that had no local connection at all.
Danvers is the hidden treasure, almost. For the real history buffs who come here, they come to Danvers and they see where it really happened.
Aside from the remains of numerous houses, Danvers is also home to one of the most unusual residences still standing, the Rebecca Nurse Homestead.
The Rebecca Nurse Homestead is 25 acres of what originally was Rebecca Nurse's home. Rebecca Nurse was accused and hanged during the Salem witch trials.
Nearly 71 years old and a model of Puritan piety, Rebecca Nurse was one of the most unlikely witches to be accused.
She was a very, very religious woman. She was a very stoic member of the church her entire life, and that's why it was so strange to have her accused.
In fact, the first verdict returned at Rebecca's trial declared her innocent, until the afflicted girls threw a fit that made the judges reconsider. Today, many historians believe Rebecca's conviction was the result of a neighbor's personal vendetta.
It had been said that Rebecca went over to the Holden house and had exchanged a few nasty words with the Holtons. A couple months later, the husband dropped dead. So Sarah Holton, who was Holton's wife, she went back and used that as evidence in court.
Rebecca's family and friends attempted to petition for her innocence, but in July 1692, without a single dissenting vote, this pillar of Puritan piety was excommunicated and hanged.
So her conviction and hanging was emblematic of exactly how far things can go.
But exactly what happened to Rebecca Nurse's body after her execution remains a mystery.
It was illegal to bring home the body of a condemned witch during the trials. So our best guess is that Rebecca's son and possibly her husband went back by nightfall, retrieved the body from the hanging site, and buried it somewhere on the property.
Family legends claim that the burial ground is west of the home in a pine grove, possibly in an unmarked grave near the rest of the family plot.
We believe she's in the vicinity of there somewhere. We're not quite sure.
Could this be Rebecca's final resting place? Or is her body lost, like so many other witch hunt victims, doomed to the indignity of an improper burial? It wasn't until 1992, 300 years after the trials, that Salem tried to reconcile this grave injustice. A civic memorial was created, giving each of the 20 victims a symbolic resting place.
It looks as though it has been there since the 17th century. It's a three-sided granite wall, hand-hewn granite blocks, and along each of the long sides there's a granite bench with the name of the victim and when he or she was hanged engraved in it. In addition, on the threshold there are some of the words that were said by the victims, and they're cut off by the wall on each side to symbolize the fact that the community was not listening to these innocent people.
The memorial is a grave reminder of the perils of suspicion, fear, and ignorance.
In the Salem Witch Museum, we give a definition or a formula for our witch hunt, and it reads, fear plus trigger equals scapegoat. And I think that formula fits the Salem witch trials.
The Salem witch trials marked the last of America's religious witch hunts, but they also foreshadowed other dark periods of similar national paranoia.
Under orders of President Roosevelt, we arrested 120,000 Japanese American farmers on the West Coast, placed them in internment camps for the duration of the war. Same thing with McCarthy. A very frightening period in our history based on fear.
For centuries, the Salem hysteria has bewitched historians and sociologists. What afflicted the girls? And how did this small village create one of the darkest hours in early American history? While we may never know the exact trigger of the witch hunt, we can learn from its tragic consequences.
I think the word witch and the name Salem are forever intertwined. I don't think there'd be any way to separate them. And I think it's a good thing. I think you can understand how a witch hunt works and then not take part in one yourself.